The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike Big Wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 909. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about beaches and silent film, dolphins and jaguars, forts, and the Fountain of Youth as we go to Northeastern Florida, to Jacksonville and St. Augustine and Amelia Island. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Florida. I'd like to welcome to the show Angie Orth from angieaway.com, also the host of Traveling with AAA and But Did You Die? We'll talk about that later. Angie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on. This is so exciting for me. Been listening to you forever. So long-time listener, first-time caller. It's very exciting.
And Angie has come to talk about Northeastern Florida. And there is method in my madness here. Angie lives there, but also I was just in St. Augustine. So I wanted to talk more about my trip, but I don't know about the area nearly as much as Angie does. So Angie is here to explain to us why someone might want to go to Northeastern Florida.
So many reasons, Chris. So many reasons. People come to Florida for a lot of different reasons, right? Mostly theme parks, maybe swamps, alligators, Miami. Those are the things when I meet people around the world that they think Florida is about, right? Everybody thinks I either live in Miami in some kind of penthouse or like at Disney World in a castle of some sort. Not a lot of people, especially from far away, not a lot of people know about Northeast Florida and sort of the wonders within. So I'm excited to talk about that specifically because I am a native of Jacksonville.
Excellent. What kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
Well, gosh, there's so much to do here, but I would say the majority of it is outdoors. It's nature. It's history. We have a ton of interesting history that even natives don't necessarily know about. It's hidden away in the neighborhoods and buried, and there's ruins and also layers of history, layers and hundreds of years and wars, and the English were in charge and then the Spanish were in charge and then the French were in charge. And you don't necessarily think of that when you're just driving around Northeast Florida. You're on I-95, it all looks the same. There's an outlet mall and there's a gas station and there's a Buc-ee's. So you don't think what had to happen historically to make this area what it is. And it's really interesting once you start going to the national park areas and the forts and the ruins.
That is what attracted me to the area. And those people who listen to the show will not be surprised that I've been wanting to get to the oldest city in the U.S. for some time, which is not Jacksonville, but it's nearby St. Augustine. Cool. Where do we start?
I guess we should probably start in Jacksonville proper, because if you're coming to Jacksonville anywhere from far flung, then you're going to land in Jacksonville at the airport. JAX, great airport. It's small, it's efficient, easy to get in and out of.
Yep.
I love it. I love living here for that specific reason. So then you can either go north or south. There's 3 counties that are on the water that I would say make up Northeast Florida. So you've got Nassau County, which is just north of the airport. So that's Fernandina Beach, Amelia Island. That's where the Ritz-Carlton is. It's lovely. It's wild and windswept beaches and huge preserves and marshes and lovely. So then the middle county is Duval. That's where I live.
Okay.
That's Jacksonville. The entirety of Duval County is known as Jacksonville, but there's tons and tons of little neighborhoods within and 22 miles of beaches just within Duval County. And obviously tons of stuff to do. There's the St. Johns River that runs through the middle and out to the ocean that has a ton of history and animals and things to do on it. And then if you go south on I-95 from the airport, you will get to St. Johns County, and that is where you went. That's where St. Augustine is, the oldest city, the Castillo de San Marcos, which is one of the oldest structures in the U.S., if not the oldest, from European settlers, old schoolhouses, and just incredible area that you can go walk around and explore, and graveyards and ghost tours and all the kind of fun things, pirate ships. So that's the area we're talking about, is those 3 counties is what I would consider Northeast Florida. Now there's further counties west. Clay County, that's where I went to high school. That's where my parents live. But for this specific deal, I'm talking about the 3 counties that are right in line on the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah.
Do you want to do them north to south to north?
Let's do north to south. We'll start up top. We'll start in Fernandina Beach and Amelia Island. So they call it like the island of, I think, 7 flags. I'd have to fact check myself on that. But because it kept changing ownership and who was in charge, was it the English? Was it the French? Was it the Spanish? And everybody was fighting over this section, which is very close to, actually, I think the county does border Georgia and the St. Mary's River. Everybody was always fighting over who owns that, the mouth of that river, and who's in charge of Florida, because this is the welcome mat to Florida. Ton of cool history there.
8 flags.
8 flags. Man, I would have got this wrong in Jeopardy, and I would have been so disappointed in myself.
7 sounded good to me, but
so 8 flags, and there's some great history tours you can take in the downtown Amelia Island area. Lots of cute bed and breakfasts. There's shrimp boats you can look at. There's train tracks and old trains. It's just really cute, charming little old town.
A little bit. So we've got bed and breakfast. Is there one you're going to recommend for us?
No, because being that I'm local, I have not actually stayed at a bed and breakfast up there, but they have a dozen super, super cute ones. And I would say the same thing about St. Augustine too. Some really charming, historic, not Airbnbs, but actual B&Bs with little owners and little fresh baked goods in the morning. I love that.
Okay. And then you said shrimp boats. Besides eating fresh shrimp, am I going on a shrimp boat? Am I just seeing them in the harbor?
I think they're more of a visual. I know that there used to be a tour you could take where you'd go out on the boat and maybe participate a little bit in the shrimping. Hey, if people want to come visit, I can show you how to shrimp. I know how to shrimp off a dock. This is a fun fact that I probably have never told anybody.
I did not know this.
I learned how to shrimp from my dad in our pool. And I had my little cast net and taught us how to throw a great cast. And we used to eat nothing but shrimp out of the St. Johns River. So yes, I don't know if folks know this, but this area, North Florida, is the home of commercial shrimping. This is the place to get the shrimp.
I did not know that. I did eat shrimp while I was in the area, but I did not know that.
Yeah, it's incredible. If you like shrimp, this is definitely the spot to get it. Let's see, other things to do in Amelia Island. I'm a spa girl. So the Ritz-Carlton has an excellent spa on the it's on the beach. It's gorgeous. And that's Fernandina Beach is what that area is called. And then there's hiking, tons of little hiking trails, very windswept and not super busy beaches.
Okay. Do you have a particular hiking trail?
So at Fort Clinch State Park, not only is there a historic fort that you can go and explore, and there's old cannons, it faces the river and the Georgia state line. So you can see across into Georgia and imagine what they would have seen way back in the day in the Revolutionary era, in the Civil War area. It's still very windswept like that. But there's a lot of hiking trails in Fort Clinch. So you can go there. You can also camp. So you can do a day trip there, or you can camp out overnight. The one trail I really like is Willow Pond Nature Trail. It's relatively easy. I think it's less than a mile and you just cruise around.
Uh,
So there are hiking trails, there are biking trails. They have small little ponds, but mostly it's coastal marsh. And I would say bring lots of bug spray because you may need it depending on the time of the year. There's really great camping and there's a museum. And like I said, there's this big historic fort that has cannons and you can go up to the top and just have beautiful views of the St. Mary's River and the Florida-Georgia line that imaginarily runs in between. Just very wild, very lovely, great place to see a sunset. And I have
and we're seeing
recently
a sunset
found
then
out that
over the river, not over the ocean, because we're on that
correct.
coast. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. It's you can and then you the cool thing about it is you can see the sun a beautiful sunrise in the morning because you're
Yep.
on the beach and then you just turn left and you can see a beautiful sunset at night over the marsh and over the land.
Okay.
Yes. Very beautiful. And it's also a great place to go shark teeth hunting. I know that's a huge pastime up
Okay.
here. Yeah.
We were looking for shark teeth when I was on the beach in St. Augustine, but did not find any. But I heard that there were other beaches. Is there a particular beach you would recommend people go to if they want to look for their shark teeth?
Fort Clinch really has good ones. And it depends on the
Okay.
tide and a variety of other things. But I have a little cousin. He's 4 years old. He just found a megalodon tooth in Fort Clinch
Oh my
last month,
gosh.
which is my
Okay.
bucket list thing. I'm dying to do that. I'm so mad my little cousin found one. We're working our way back up to Fort Clinch so we can actually look for them too.
Okay. How
Yeah.
big is a megalodon?
Like the size of your hand.
Okay. Wow.
Can be. Yeah. Pretty big. Pretty big. Yeah. Yeah. And they're not super common to find just in general,
Right.
but if you do, you're having a great day, especially if you find one on the beach because there's people on the beach and there's tides. And so it's coming and going. But there's a lot of places in Florida you can go in a freshwater river and go snorkeling with a sieve and
Okay.
scoop all kinds of them up. Not so much up here, but in southern parts of Florida.
Okay.
After Fort Clinch. So Fort Clinch is at the very top. So I would take, I think it's A1A. Yeah. I would take A1A down and explore and just stop at every free beach access along the way because they're just beautiful. There's horseback riding tours that you can book, which I'm not a huge fan of horses. I'll be honest. I did it a couple years ago because my in-laws came to visit and they really wanted to do it. So we went and did the horseback riding in Amelia Island and it was lovely. It was actually very nice. Even I just think horses don't like me. It's not their
Angie,
fault.
I
but-
have a hard time picturing anybody not liking you. So
Oh, I have so many stories. We don't have time for that. But
we'll
yes,
get
if
to your
you're
stories
into
much later in the podcast.
yes, if you're into horseback riding, this is a great place to do it on the beach. And I think probably the only place in North Florida that you really can because they
Okay.
don't have such things as you go further south into the more busy beaches. But then as you cruise down this stunning, wild, windswept, it's dunes, it's palm trees, it's scrubby, dense underbrush, and you may see a deer. You definitely see probably a dead armadillo or two because it just happens. You might see raccoons. There's all sorts of wildlife that you could run
Okay.
into, but you're just cruising down this gorgeous, wild road. So then you're out of Nassau County and you're heading into Duval County. Couple ways to get in. You can stay on the road and take the highway, or you can hop on the St. John's River Ferry, which is such a little, I don't want to say hidden gem, but because of course people use it, but it's something a lot of people don't know about because it's just off in Mayport. Anyway, you hop on, it's a couple of bucks. It's very easy. You don't have to wait a long time. It comes every 30 minutes on either side of the river, and you cross the St. John's River in about 10 minutes. And so then you're on the other side, you're into Duval County, and now you're in Jacksonville officially.
Okay. And what are we doing in Jacksonville?
Now, this is tricky because Jacksonville is so big. People don't realize Jacksonville is the largest land area city in the country. It's the whole county of Duval. It's huge. It's enormous. And I can't say that enough. I don't know. I think our population is definitely over 1 million, but it does feel like a small town because you have little towns within the big town, right? So when people think of Jacksonville, they think of our pretty skyline. We have an adorable little walkable downtown on the St. John's River, which legend has it, there's only 2 rivers in the world that flow north, the Nile and the St. John's River. I don't think that's true, but it's what we used to always say and made us feel special.
The river in my hometown flowed north.
But it's one of those
And
hometown
Jacksonville
things.
seems to be the seventh largest city by land area, but we
False.
say a lot of things from our home.
That can't be true. And we have the most parks of any county anywhere, like the most city, state, and federal parks of anywhere. There's a lot of green space in Jacksonville. So I think if you're coming to Jacksonville, you want to decide ahead of time, what is your goal? What are you into? Because you're going to want to pick where to stay based on that. I would say a lot of people come for an event. So people will come either for a wedding or for a football game or a concert, or oftentimes a concert maybe in St. Augustine. We have this incredible amphitheater in St. Augustine. So I would recommend, because Jacksonville is so expansive, I would recommend staying close to whatever your event is and hub and spoke your way out of that. You're going to have to rent a car.
Yep.
Probably should have said that, because while we have public transportation, it is not efficient, and you're not going to be getting around quickly. And if you want to see the whole place, you would want to get around quickly. So best thing to do is have a car and cruise your way around from there. I think most people who come to visit Jacksonville probably want to explore the beaches. We're pretty famous for our beaches for a lot of reasons. One, they're not nearly as busy as most of the beaches in Florida. Really.
Right.
There's still quite a lot of free parking. It's not super crowded most of the time. There can be weekends that get wild, but you very often can be out there with just a handful of other people.
Well, you have so many miles of beaches in the area we're talking about here that it's hard to picture how you could possibly fill them all up.
It's wild because Jacksonville has a large population. There's so much going on here, but it still feels like an under the radar destination. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Probably just because we're spoiled in Florida of amazing places to go, just incredible beaches and fun stuff to do. And it's just everywhere. So Jacksonville, anywhere else would probably be the jewel in the crown. But here it's the fifth sister who gets the hand-me-downs way down the list, even though it's absolutely great. But I think that just makes us lucky, those of us who live here. We are in on this little secret. So I would say stay out at the beach. There's several great hotels out. There's a historic one that I really like. It's Casa Marina Hotel, and it's right on the beach. It's historic. It's like the last remaining thing standing from, like, the last remaining structure, I think, from the silent film days. Jacksonville used to be Hollywood. Back in the silent film era, Jacksonville was where all that took place. So all the famous people came here. Things were getting filmed here. There's still a studio tour you can take to do the whole tour of what the silent film era was like in a museum. So it's really interesting. And I like that hotel particularly because it does have so much history. It's got a beautiful rooftop bar that has an amazing weekend brunch. And it's just a good spot to base yourself. And there are other hotels on either side. But I think the thing to note is it's not jam-packed with hotels. It's hotel and 15 houses and then a hotel. And then 50 houses and then a hotel. So people still live here. It's very much residential. The people who live at the beach live at the beach. Sure, there's some short-term rentals and things like that, but it's still very much a lived-in place with its own culture. Spend time at the beach. All I can say about spending time at the beach is don't burn yourself. There's plenty of places to park, and there's a handful of gift shops and beachy shops. Again, not like any other seaside town that you're going to find in Florida, where it's wall-to-wall souvenir shops and surf shops and stuff like that. You're going to find a few. There's a couple pockets of walkable retail areas, and then it's homes and neighborhoods. There's also the Seawalk Pavilion down there. So almost every weekend there's concerts, festivals. So if you're staying down at the beach, you'll probably end up walking around there, checking out the food trucks, tons of restaurants down there. One of my favorites is called Azurea, and it's at the One Ocean Hotel, which is probably the most luxurious hotel, I would say. And I wouldn't even call it luxurious. It's just more upscale. Jacksonville has a very low-key kind of a vibe. You're not finding a lot of very expensive accommodations in Duval County proper, even on the water. It's pretty reasonable. We are getting, I think, a Four Seasons downtown within the next couple of years. So that will change that conversation a bit. But at the beach, it's pretty reasonable to stay right on the beach. There's a Margaritaville hotel, there's One Ocean, there's Casa Marina, and then there's a couple of chains that you would expect. But that's it. It's not 100 hotels, it's 6, you
Okay.
know? So for 22 miles of beaches, it's still such a small town vibe down there.
It is not
Truly.
Miami Beach, is what you're saying.
It really is not. It is not. And the beach also is not Miami Beach. It's not that turquoise water, but it is very swimmable. And sometimes there's good waves, and sometimes we call it Lake Atlantic affectionately because it's super flat and chill and nice for paddleboarding. There's several places you can rent paddle boards or surfboards. There's surf lessons you can take right from the Atlantic Beach Town Center. There's a surf shop there that does great surf lessons, and easy too. I think it's quite different probably than learning to surf in California.
Well, you don't need the wetsuit for one thing. Up where I live,
Yeah.
it does get warmer as you go south. But
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Thinking
a
of
different
warmer,
vibe. Mm-hmm.
when do you recommend people come to Florida? I was just there in July. Not sure I would recommend July for the weather. When is the best time to be in the area?
I'd say it probably depends what you're coming for, but if you
Sure.
don't want to melt, if humidity is not your favorite thing, which who likes humidity? Come on. I would say spring or fall is going to be your best. And spring lasts about 2 weeks in maybe March. Yeah, I would say like March, April are probably pretty temperate. March, April,
Okay.
May. And then fall, you're looking at October, November are pretty temperate. Even December, we've had Christmases wearing shorts. So
Sure.
the thing about Northeast Florida is our weather is all over the place, and it's almost always going to be quite temperate. You're going to have a couple days where it's really cold and it's 30 degrees and we're all just frozen to 30 degrees for 2 hours.
There are people who are laughing at you, you understand, for saying
I
30
know.
degrees and saying really cold. But yeah.
And listen, 30 degrees for 2 hours in the middle of the night. I'm not even talking about like for days on end, but it's like we have a freeze warning. There's sirens. It's very important when it's freezing. But then we have some very hot days too. So I would say middle of summer, July and August are hot. That's really when it's going to be the steamiest. And then you also have to think about hurricane season. It's not a huge concern. I shouldn't say that. We get pretty lucky in this area.
Ironic,
for whatever reason.
as you say that, because the hurricane just went through yesterday.
It did, but it was not a direct hit. It almost
Right.
never is. I feel like I'm a longtime native Jacksonville, Florida resident, and we've never had a direct hit since I've lived here. We've mostly gotten outer bands of a storm passing or something crossing across the state.
Which I didn't realize that is typical, that you'll get the hurricane that's on the rebound, as it were. So it's coming across the land and therefore is losing a lot of energy by the time it gets to you.
It does. It often loses, I feel like, a lot of wind energy,
Sure.
but it's the water that gives us the biggest trouble in that situation
Sure,
because
yeah.
you get storm surge and then you get water coming all the way up into the St. Johns River from very far south.
Yeah.
And so then it's a domino effect. We had a storm come through yesterday. In 3 days, we'll know how bad some of the flooding is going to be in some of the tributaries. So very
And we're
tricky.
recording this on August 6th. So you had a storm just come through. And the hurricane season, as I recall, is kind of June to November. But I don't know
Yes.
how broad a band that is, if I'm more likely to see them in some particular month or not. It seems like when I looked at the history, it was August to September were more likely.
Yeah, I would say August and September, it seems to be where we see the most of them, but there's no science to that.
Right.
It's just you're going to get what you're going to get depending on El Nino, La Nina, weather
Right,
patterns. There's so many things that go into it. So as a Floridian, we stay ready and I don't freak out. I did when I first moved back from New York and bought a house and became a homeowner and was like, oh no, hurricane season. Now I'm much more rational about it. And I know when I'm going to evacuate and when I'm not.
Right.
And,
And
you know,
obviously, I was just there in hurricane season and voluntarily, and the odds of running into a hurricane were pretty low compared to the odds of
yeah.
running into humid weather.
Oh my goodness.
Which are pretty high.
Absolutely. I tell people that all the time, especially we talk about hurricane season. And for the people who don't live in a hurricane season affected area, they think it's just rains for the entirety of hurricane season, or the weather is
Right.
bad
No.
for the entirety of hurricane season. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's still the Sunshine State for a reason. It's still sunny all the time, except the one day you might get a hurricane once every 10 years. So
Yep.
I wouldn't ever let hurricane season deter me from planning a trip to anywhere. You just get travel insurance if you're concerned.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Excellent.
You know,
what else are we seeing in the Jacksonville area before we head further south here?
I would like to take folks over to downtown. There are some really cute water taxi tours you can take of the downtown skyline and riverfront. There's a beautiful river walk area that you can cruise all around, really both sides of the river. What else? The stadium is super cool, and they're apparently building us a new one that will be up and running in a couple of years.
We're talking American football here.
American football.
So the
Yes,
Jacksonville Panthers.
No, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who every year is going to be our year. And I stand by that. This coming season, that's definitely our year. We have a cool stadium. We have swimming pools in our stadium, so you can swim while you're watching football. I
actually don't know this.
Yeah. There's some very
I assume
cool,
that's
sort
limited.
Yes, it's not for everyone all the time. There's just a couple of pools that you can hop in and cool off. How fun is that? Because it can get very hot in the stadium if you're there in early football season. Yeah, super fun. We have a great mascot, Jackson DeVille, who zip lines into the stadium from the top of the stadium, like Lady Gaga at the Super Bowl. Very cool. So if you're in town, if you want to catch a game, that's super fun. Also home of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, known as the Florida Georgia Game, every year at the end of October. And that is played at the stadium. It used to be the Gator Bowl. And then once we got the Jaguars, built it up into a big NFL stadium. But the Florida Gators and the Georgia Bulldogs still play there every year in the big rivalry. So that's huge. That's a huge thing that brings people to town every October. And what else? So you can take a water taxi tour. We have dolphins in the river. A lot of people get surprised when they see dolphins just popping up under the bridges. And we have 7 beautiful bridges to see in town. A big red one, a big blue one, a big green one, and then a big suspension bridge. Gorgeous, really. Jacksonville's very famous for its bridges. And then right around downtown, you'll find these historic neighborhoods that have been here for 100+ years and have some stunning architecture, original, beautiful old buildings. And so those neighborhoods, you would look at San Marco, you would look at Ortega and Avondale, also Springfield, which is just next to downtown. Beautiful historic homes, and some walkable areas. So yeah, if you're into older neighborhoods, walkable little neighborhoods with a lot of character, those are some great neighborhoods to check out.
And I'm picturing brick buildings, tree-lined streets.
Oh, yeah.
Quaint downtown. Am I in the right mental model here?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where you'll find a lot of the really great local restaurants that you'll only find in Jacksonville. You can't go too far in Jacksonville without coming on a completely different neighborhood with its own vibe and its own kind of people and its own character.
And you mentioned local restaurants. I imagine you have one or two favorites.
I have so many favorites. That's the thing. There's so many places to eat in Jacksonville that it really boils down to where are you? Because you don't want to drive 30 minutes to get good food, because you can just get food within 10 minutes, right? So BB's is one of my favorites. That's in San Marco. So delicious. They have some of the best desserts in town, I would say. What's another good one? Bistro X has French food. Very good. That's also in San Marco. There's Ocean Street Tacos that have some of the best tacos. I say some of the best tacos in town. We probably have 20 taco places that I say are the best tacos in town. But if you're downtown, Ocean Street Tacos is really good. Got some excellent options. The Bearded Pig. If I didn't mention the Bearded Pig, my husband would be so mad at me because we go there at least once a week. Incredible barbecue. This is where we take everybody from out of town for barbecue. And there's a location in San Marco, and there's a newer one out at the beach. So if you're already all the way out at the beach, then you can still go to the Bearded Pig. And that's just a couple. That's just San Marco and one in downtown. There's also, oh my gosh, Carolina Jack's. That's over more toward Riverside. And that is the best burgers, I think, probably in town. They're smash burgers. They have one with goat cheese and arugula, and it is so good. See, now I'm just getting hungry thinking about all these places
Sorry about that.
that are 15 minutes away from me that I could just absolutely eat right now. I really could. I could go on and on. There's no shortage. And I would just say, ask a local person. If you're staying in a hotel, ask at the front desk, and don't be sucked into chain restaurants because we have so much more. You could eat all local your whole trip and be very happy with that because there's so many good places.
Anything else we want to see when we're in downtown or those neighborhoods?
We have a couple of really good museums in Jacksonville. Okay. I think if you've got little ones, MOSH, which is the Museum of Science and History, such a fun one. My sister and I try to go there all the time because it's nostalgic for us. We used to go there on field trips as kids, but it's a really good little museum, and it's right next to, it's in San Marco on the South Bank, and it's right next to Friendship Fountain, which has just been redone and now has a whole music and light show in the evenings. So you're right on the river. You got the beautiful fountain. You could spend your day at the various museums or walking the bridges. I wouldn't do that in the summer because it's so hot. In the winter, it's lovely to walk over the bridges from neighborhood to neighborhood. Not an easy walk by any stretch. These aren't little bridges. This is a very large river in a very large town. It's really hoofing it, but it's a beautiful walk. And what else? And then back over in Riverside, there is this stunning art museum called the Kummer Gallery. And that's where all the famous works are that we would have and the famous artists that you might know of. And it's right on the river. So it's got this beautiful gardens, just gorgeous to go hang out. They have events where you can just have like cocktails in the gardens and then go look at the art. Lovely spot. Very chill.
I'm picturing contemporary art.
No, not really. Okay. I think mostly that is more like classic art. And then downtown, there's the Contemporary Art Museum. It's called MoCA. Yeah. And that is an amazing museum in and of itself. You could definitely spend a day doing MOSH, the Kummer, and MoCA, and then just eat all the food in between. And you're talking about, you would have driven 2 or 3 miles in the grand scheme of all of Jacksonville, and you would have done and seen so much and eaten so much. And just a tiny little sliver. So I would say, as great as Jacksonville is to visit, it's also one of those places that's overwhelming because it's so big and there is so much to do and see that you feel like you'll miss it. That's always the struggle I come up with. There's one other thing in Jacksonville that I recommend people do, and that's the Caddyshack Ranch. It's the number one thing to do in Jacksonville on TripAdvisor. And it is a big cat rescue. So if you think about
fat tabby cats, you mean tigers?
No, not
lions.
Fat cats, like big cats. Yeah, like tigers, lions. There's a bear or two. There's various panthers and pumas. And and it started out, basically they rescue ones where people either owned the animals privately and then couldn't take care of them, or there's some kind of seizure, things happen. And if you got caught up in Tiger King at all back in the pandemic, it's like that, except not like that. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful, it's nothing like Tiger King other than there are tigers there. I'll say that. They don't breed. They don't sell. They just rescue. And it's basically a retirement home for tigers and such that need somewhere to go. So that is a super cool thing. And what they do that's different is you go in the evenings and they feed all the tigers and all the animals just right there. So they've got these huge bowls of chicken and steak. And of course, every cat has its own preference. Some of them are getting a certain cut of beef, and some of them are just only on white meat right now. And they're very picky in particular, and it's very cute. So they go through and feed all the animals, and they're so active in the evening because that's when cats tend to be more active.
Right.
And if you go to a zoo, you see animals laying around all day, right? So this is the difference. You actually get to see them running around and swimming in their pools. They have these beautiful enclosures that have been built by local businesses. So they have more space and they live better than I do. And they certainly eat better than I do most of the time. So that's a really cool thing. And I mention it because it is the number one thing to do in Jacksonville on TripAdvisor. Super
Right.
cool.
Hmm.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Anything else in Jacksonville, or is it time to head further south?
I could go on and on forever and ever in a day, but let's head further south because I've covered the beach and I've covered the
Right.
middle of town and downtown and the St. Johns River area. So let's head south. We would hop on I-95 and head down to St. Augustine, and that's in St. Johns County. Again, many miles of beaches, tons, just acres and acres of wildlife management area and national park. That's not a national park. What is it? Guana Tolomato Matanzas National Estuarine Research Reserve.
Got it.
Say that 15 times in a row. Goodness gracious. So Guana is this beautiful, basically state park that's right on the water, but then there's a river in between and then there's marsh everywhere. So perfect for a road trip, a picnic, just exploring. There's hiking trails along the way, but mostly it's just deserted beaches, basically. Again, even more deserted beaches. You're talking, I don't know, 50, 100 miles with these three counties of really quite unpopulated beach area, very wild. So then after you get through the state park wild area, you end up down in downtown St. Augustine, which isn't huge, certainly not compared to Jacksonville. It's a pretty small area. And there's the residential area that's newer, and then there's the historic little downtown. And that's probably where you spent most of your time, right?
Yeah, I spent most of my time within the range of the hop on, hop off buses. So
yes, the trolley.
The trolley. So I did get out to Anastasia State Park and the miles and miles of beaches there, and we biked along the coast there. And I tried stand-up paddleboarding, or as I call it, paddleboarding, because I never stood up, but enjoyed that. And that is by where you were talking about the amphitheater. In fact, Barbara, who is from the tourism board there, because I was on a sponsored trip there, said they will often camp at the campground there, which is just behind the St. Augustine Amphitheater. You could walk there and don't have to worry about driving in and out during the crowded events that are going on at the amphitheater.
Yes, we do that too. It's such a good little hack if you're going to go see a show there. And it's such a nice little, I don't want to call it little, but it feels like an intimate experience. It's outdoor. There's a bit of a covering over it. And it's just a nice place to see a concert because you really are a hop, skip, and a jump from the beach, from a marsh, from a river, and from downtown St. Augustine. So if you're ever wanting to visit St. Augustine, I would say maybe try and plan it around a show that you want to see at the amphitheater. And pretty much just down the street, just a couple minutes, a minute even from the amphitheater is the alligator farm. Super
Which
famous.
I did not get to on this trip. That's one of the reasons you're here.
Oh my goodness. The alligator farm is a trip. Now, I think as a Floridian, I don't get as excited about alligators, but I've took some friends from Bolivia to the alligator farm one time, and it was just worth the price of admission because they were just so bowled over by 50 alligators just rolling all over each other in mud and fighting for food and trying to get the meat. It's a wild place. And they also have birds and snakes and other kinds of animals too. So very cool place to go. And one thing I would say to do at the alligator farm that I really like doing, they have a zip line and a ropes course that you're basically ziplining over various alligator habitats, which some people are going to say, what is wrong with you? Why would anybody ever do that? But I'm a Floridian. So this is like another day in Florida.
I know that there's no chance that the line is going to break. Very little chance the line is going to
Yeah.
break, or that I'm going to drop into the alligators. And yet, as a non-Floridian, I would have
Yeah.
second thoughts. I would. Let's
Yeah.
put that. I'm not
Okay.
saying I wouldn't do it. That my wife couldn't talk me into it, but it would give me pause.
Mm. Yeah, I could see that. And meanwhile, we're just like, oh, yeah, it's like going outside in Florida, right? You just never know when you're going to meet an alligator in the wild. So that's a really fun place to go. So the amphitheater, the alligator farm, and then in this same little block, basically on A1A, is the lighthouse and maritime museum. And the lighthouse is one of the iconic parts of the skyline in St. Augustine that you would see and notice, and you can climb up to the top. I think there's legend says it's haunted. I don't know. Did you get to go there?
I did not. I only saw it from the distance. I will
Okay.
say, I have to admit that I did not realize that every lighthouse had a distinctive pattern in their
Mm,
paint job so that the ships could recognize which lighthouse they were looking at in the daytime, and
yeah.
obviously distinctive light at nighttime. I don't know why it took me so long to pick that up. I was this many years old when I
Mm,
learned that, but we don't have
yeah.
quite as many lighthouses here, or not as prominent.
Yeah. And you figure if you're not out in the water, you're never using that for navigation. And you just like, I forgot everybody hasn't always had GPS. There was a time where we had to use real maps to get
Right.
places. And I imagine at that time, a map wouldn't do you so much good if you were coming in by boat. A lighthouse with a distinctive color pattern would. You don't think about those things if you never need to use them.
Right. Interesting. What
Hmm.
else are you going to recommend in St. Augustine?
I would spend a good chunk of time in downtown St. Augustine. That's really
Okay.
what you come for, right? So the things I just mentioned, the lighthouse and the amphitheater and the alligator farm, those are over on Anastasia Island, and that's where the
Right.
state park is. But it's not far. We're talking
Right.
a quick little drive over the Bridge of Lions, which is a beautiful bridge that
Yep.
goes over the Matanzas River, and then you're in downtown St. Augustine, which is not like any other place in Florida and really no other place, I think, in the US that I can think of. It's got that, I don't know, that Pirates of the Caribbean kind of vibe
Yeah.
going
Especially
for
if you go
it.
to the Pirate Museum. So
Yes. Yes. Did you get to go there?
I did go to the Pirate Museum. I had actually interviewed for a video interview the original owner of the Pirate Museum before. So it was someplace I did want to get to, and I enjoyed it. If you have kids, I would definitely take them there, because then you get the map and did you find all of the different secret drawers and things like that is the
Oh,
kid
fun.
experience. But as somebody who just loves history, seeing one of the original Jolly Roger flags and learning about the different pirates, I just thought it was fun. And it's right
Yes.
across from, you mentioned the Castillo de San Marcos, which
Mhm.
is the fort there, which is the oldest brick building, I think, in the U.S. is its distinction here. Certainly one of the oldest forts, if not the oldest in the U.S. And
Mhm.
it doesn't take that long to tour. Very interesting in its own right, obviously historically significant, built by the Spanish. You
Mhm.
mentioned all the different flags that have flown here. This was Spanish Florida. And
Mhm.
it was interesting because in addition to that, I also got up to the two different portions of their fortifications, which were Fort Mossy, State
Mhm.
Historic Park in the north, which was the first free black settlement in what
Mhm.
is now the U.S. It obviously wasn't the U.S. at the time. And in fact, these people were coming down as often as escaped slaves from the Carolinas. And so they were coming down to this region because although the Spanish also had slavery, there was a political thing going on that if you leave these British colonies and come down to us, we will give you your freedom. And
Mm.
so they were coming down there, and a fascinating place. They're rebuilding a replica of the original fort there. It should be
Mm.
ready by 2025.
Okay.
They just got the money to do that. It wasn't a large place, very historically significant place, and they do a program once a year there where you can walk with reenactors from place to place as if you were along basically the first underground railroad in the US.
Wow.
Went south, not north. It went down here to Florida. And so, very interesting place. The original site of the fort is out in the marshes and mostly lost, except for
Mm.
archaeologists, but a small visitor center, which is interesting there. Good thing to see if you're interested in the history area. And then the other small fort that I went to is the other end of the river, guarding the southern end. There is a Fort Matanzas,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little tiny fort that protected the people from coming in the back door of the mouth of the river. And so went and saw that as well. You take the ferry over and enjoy that. So history buffs, I would definitely recommend those three things. I've written about one of them so far in the blog posts, but I haven't written about the other two. I've written about the Castillo de San Marcos, but not the other two yet. That's coming.
And that's such a good point. I think it's very easy to go to St. Augustine and say it's the oldest city and
Right.
here's the history and that's it. But there's so much more in this area. If you spent the most jam-packed day doing fort tours from St. Augustine up to Jacksonville, up to
Right.
Fort, like ending in Fort Clinch, that would be a crazy busy day. And it would cover so many flags changing hands and wars and battles and just hard to think of all the different layers. And I say this as a resident and a
Right.
native. I didn't even know all this when I was young. I was like, yeah, St. Augustine, cool. I didn't realize that's not just cool, that's amazing. When you go there and see a city that was started in the 1500s, you don't get a lot of that in the US. It's really, you don't get it at all. Right. I don't know, just the sort of last 200 years that we sometimes focus on as Americans, right? Gosh, there's just so much more to it. And yeah, if you're a history buff and you haven't been to North Florida, you're missing out.
And the
There's
other thing,
some cool
and
stuff
this is
here.
going to sound funny, is going up to the Fountain of Youth
Mhm.
because this started as just what it sounds like, which is a cheap roadside attraction of, hey, drink the water from the Fountain of Youth, which Ponce de Leon apparently, supposedly was in search of, but it happens to be located where St. Augustine actually started, which is a little north of the old downtown. And so it
Mhm.
has become a more significant cultural site with reenactors showing you their ancient cannons or arquebuses or blacksmithing or things like that as well. But it was an old Indian village there as well, and where St. Augustine started. So it's worth a stop. And you also get to drink from the Fountain of Youth.
Hey, you might as well. If you're there,
It's
like
worth a
don't
try.
don't miss the chance. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe it doesn't work.
I probably haven't done that since I was a kid, but
Probably.
hopefully it counts forever, right? Hopefully it lasts a good long time. Yeah,
Although
it's
still a
okay.
kid, so that calls into the question the efficacy of it. But
That's true, but I don't have a lot of wrinkles yet. So it could be work. We just don't know. I didn't drink a lot. It's sulfurous. And so as a kid, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to drink a lot of that. But now I'm thinking I probably should have. I should have had a whole gallon and we'd be in a very different situation than we're in now.
the other thing that I didn't know from history, much more recent history, is Flagler College.
Mm,
And that whole history of Flagler, who built the railroad down here so that people could enjoy their winters in Florida instead of up in the frozen north.
yeah.
That old hotel that he built there is now a college. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other hotel that he built across the street from it is now the Leitner Museum and the City Hall for St. Augustine. These very opulent hotels that were all built basically. The sort of second discovery of St. Augustine was this as a place for people to come down in the winter months. And it was interesting because you had to stay for the whole season at the hotel. So
Mm.
this is only for the very rich. This is not something that I would have been able to do back in the day. But interesting just how that portion of the history also adds to what's going on. And the thing that I did not remember at all was the whole civil rights
Mm.
history. And I did not get to the Lincolnville Museum. I got there, but it was closed when I got there. But there's a cultural museum and a museum there in what was the historic Black neighborhood about the civil rights protests. It's right there off of Martin Luther King Ave. And that whole portion of the history of St. Augustine, I didn't know. I'd have
Mm.
to say, even though I was alive for a part of it, I don't remember St. Augustine coming up in those conversations.
No, even growing up, I don't think I was exposed to that as much. And now just looking around and being more aware of it, there's a lot of really interesting, really impactful civil rights history that happened in this area from,
Right.
I think it's American Beach in Fernandina that has a whole history of being, I think, an African-American only beach for a while. And then there's this square in downtown Jacksonville that a whole thing went down. And oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the name of it. I think it was like Axe Handle Saturday or something like
Oh
that. And
no, that sounds
it
like
was
a very bad thing.
a very bad thing. But it really was, I think, I don't know, just growing up here, we didn't learn as much about it and we thought it was everywhere else. And now I could say there's a lot on the civil rights trail that very important stuff happened in Northeast Florida. So there's a lot to explore and internalize and understand on all that.
Cool. Getting back to you, anything else you would recommend in St. Augustine?
Anything else I would recommend? I went to a fantastic wedding at the Casa Monica. So if you ever get invited to a wedding there, it's a beautiful historic hotel. And the King and Queen of Spain have stayed there. And it's super luxurious and wonderful. And even if you don't get invited to a wedding, it's a great place to stay, right in the heart of everything. Really, downtown St. Augustine is pretty walkable. And like you said, there's the trolley that you can hop all around. And then a good time, I would say, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Nights of Lights. And that is an event that happens in St. Augustine around the holidays. And I think throughout January, where there's just lights everywhere, white lights in the trees, white lights on every building. And it's just super sparkly and a great time to enjoy more temperate weather and walk around and explore the old streets and the cemeteries and the various architecture from so many different eras.
That's 2 months long. So this year I see November 23rd, 2024 through January 26th. And it sounds like a wonderful time to be there and not quite as humid as when I was there.
No, it's usually pretty nice. It's a good time to go walk around because St. Augustine is quite walkable. The main stuff is very walkable, but not when it's 1,000 degrees. So if you're sensitive to humidity and you don't want to be melty, then it's a really good time to come toward in the winter. If you want to spend most of your time at the beach, then sky's the limit. Any time of year will do.
You had mentioned B&Bs when we were further north. I have one that I can recommend that I did stay in, again, sponsored by St. Augustine, and that's the Carriage Way Inn B&B. I actually stayed in their extended property, which is across the street, but had most of my breakfast in the Carriage Way. And they have a sign out front of the best B&B in St. Augustine multiple years running. They've got a good thing going there with lovely common spaces, beautiful rooms, good Wi-Fi for those of us who are trying to get blogging done at the same time, and just a lovely experience staying there. It is adults only, and so there are other hotels you'd need to stay in downtown that I'd recommend if you're there with kids, but that is not someplace you'd stay. Would be the Carriageway, which is a shame because it is a good breakfast and complimentary soft drinks and wine and cookies in the evenings. What can you say? Any place that gives me free cookies is high on my list.
I'm sold. I will drive there right now and check in and get some cookies and whatever. Yeah, it's a beautiful town. And I'm assuming, I think Carriage Way is pretty walkable to everything. It's in the middle of everything. Oh my gosh,
it's right in the middle of everything. Yeah, there's a couple different B&Bs down there. It really 2 blocks from the old part of town. So very easy to get anywhere from there. Even in the summer, I was walking around and not difficult to do. The couple places to eat that I would recommend, one that I would highly recommend because I am a barbecue fan, and we went to Smokin' D's Barbecue, and there's one south of town, which is the original one, and we went to the newer one that the son is running, Cameron Parrott, and just some wonderful barbecue worth trying. Cameron managed to talk me into liking white sauce, and that's something I thought no one would ever do, but his has a kind of a peppery tang to it, and on his smoked turkey, that was just really great. You got to get there, though. I would go for lunch because it's one of those places that's real smoked barbecue, and when they run out, and so it's open until 7 or when they run out, and you get there at 6, and I imagine it's going to be, we don't have that, we don't have that, we don't have that.
Right.
But really good smoking barbecue. And the other one that I'd say, I won't mention everything that we went to, but I really did enjoy the Columbia restaurant, which is both Spanish and Cuban. It was really wonderful. And I've got an article that I'll post in the show notes that covers a couple of the other ones as well, including the Salt Life Food Shack and another seafood restaurant. But I also got to the St. Augustine Distillery. And if you're a fan of bourbon, they have the first 2 legal stills in Florida since Prohibition, and they're not that old. So that was something that surprised me, is they're really have been in business. I don't remember the date exactly, but I think it's less than 10 years, and yet have some wonderful bourbon there. They also do rum and gin and vodka and such, but they do self-guided tours as well as tours and classes, and that was quite enjoyable as well.
That is a lovely spot.
Yeah. Anything else we want to talk about in St. Augustine? Or is it time to start heading towards wrapping this up?
I think it might be time to wrap it up. Otherwise, I'm going to talk for hours. Because I'm going to be thinking of things for the next 3 days. Oh, yeah. I should have said. Oh, I should have said. I've left out everything. I've left out whole neighborhoods. But it's a big area to cover. Yeah. And there is a lot to do. And just depending on what you're here for, how much time you have,
being a guest on the Amateur Traveler is quite often to have what the French call the esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the stair, which is that thing you remember saying too late to say. So,
wow, I can feel that coming on already.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, you are standing in the prettiest spot in all 3 counties that we talked about. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Oh my goodness, Chris, this is not a fair question. This is not a fair question because there are so many pretty spots. Gosh, St. Augustine probably, if you're walking across the Bridge of Lions at dusk on a beautiful non-humid night, maybe during Nights of Lights, that is a beautiful way to see all of St. Augustine before you, all of the historic cobblestones and old oak trees and just beautiful architecture. That's a really beautiful spot. And then I think north of Maine, Jacksonville, if you want that, there's going to be a lot of people if you're at Nights of Lights, and that's its own thing. But if you want a windswept sunset all to yourself on the beach, there's this area called Boneyard Beach, and you just drive up and Google it and Google map it, and you take a little trail down and you're on this beach full of huge driftwood, old trees with the roots and the branches, and everything's bleached out, but it's really big and you forget where you are because it's not like any other beach in North Florida. And it's, I'd say, very romantic and very deserted, and feels like you're on a deserted island just out there. So that's probably my favorite secret spot.
Excellent. I would say I have a similar reaction to you in terms of St. Augustine. I'd be in the downtown, but I'd probably be on a sailboat. I got out on St. Augustine with St. Augustine sailing on a sailboat down to the downtown, and anything on a sailboat tops it for me. But I also got to the rooftop terrace of the San Sebastian Winery and watched the sunset from there over the river. And that was beautiful. We ate at La Cocina International there, which was a wonderful place to eat as well, but just a beautiful spot for watching the sunset downtown St. Augustine. Cool. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Northeastern Florida.
Oh, goodness. Like the appropriate thing or the non? We have Florida Man around here. I don't know about Florida Man, but
everybody's heard of Florida Man. I don't know if our international listeners know about Florida Man, but basically it's the story in the news that makes no sense at all that someone would behave this way until you explain it that it's Florida Man.
Yeah, when they say Florida Man caught smuggling alligators in his pants, that's the vibe of Florida Man. So anytime people think of Florida, sometimes they think of Florida Man, which is, it's not like Bigfoot. It's a real thing. It really is. It's real and it exists. But I might have to say something like the alligator farm, where we're just we're just casually ziplining over alligators. Like it's the thing to do in Florida. And it is, or we're swimming in the middle of our NFL game, just cooling off in the pool with a cocktail and hanging around.
As one does.
Yeah, as one does. I think those kind of things give you an idea of what Northeast Florida is like and how different it is from much of the rest of the state. Florida is really such a unique place. And yes,
Right.
it's one state, but I think every big city in Florida kind of has its own thing going on and could almost be its own state or its own country. It's its own principality. Jacksonville and St. Augustine and Fernandina Beach, they really have just a fun, wild, low-key, barefoot kind of vibe.
And here's a question for you.
Hmm.
Are you in the South in Jacksonville, or do I need to go north to be, quote, in the South? I know if I head south, I'm not in the South.
I think Jacksonville counts as the South.
Okay.
I would say Orlando, not the South. Miami, not the South. Jacksonville, I think, is probably the start of the South.
Okay.
Pretty much. Yeah. I would say probably north of I-10. No, that's probably not even true. But for visualization purposes, north of I-10 in Florida, definitely I would consider that the South. Because we're so close to Georgia.
Yeah.
In Jacksonville area, I don't know, maybe a 40-minute drive to the state line from the middle of Jacksonville. So yeah, people say we're basically Georgia, but I don't claim that. I'm a Florida girl.
All right, then. And if you had to summarize the region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
Chris, you're putting me on the spot. Oh, let's see. Barefoot Southern charm.
Excellent. Excellent.
Sure.
Our guest again has been Angie Orth. We mentioned multiple times that Angie has stories. Some of these stories just came out in a book. Congratulations on your new book. Want to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. If anybody is interested in learning more about Jacksonville and some of the things that make Jacksonville so special, I do talk about that a bit in the book and growing up in this land of Southern rock. So the book is called Flirting with Disaster, which some folks will probably recognize as the title of a Molly Hatchet song. And some folks might know who Molly Hatchet is. Probably not everybody. I know that's a regional delicacy like shrimp and grits. Do you know who Molly Hatchet is, Chris?
I have heard Molly Hatchet.
Could
I pick a song that she's done? I'm not sure I could, but.
Okay. So Molly Hatchet is a Southern rock band in the same vein as like Lynyrd Skynyrd, both from Jacksonville. So there's a very big.
That when I said she has done, you know that I know nothing about what I'm talking about.
Right. So if you're not a Southern rock fan, then this one probably goes right over your head. But Jacksonville is the home of Southern rock in addition to many other things.
Yeah.
So Molly Hatchet started here and Lynyrd Skynyrd started here. And my dad happened to tour with Molly Hatchet. So it was a fun little way to bring Jacksonville in to the title of my book, Flirting with Disaster, because that was probably their biggest hit. But it's a book about travel. And it's a book about a trip I took in 2011 around the world by myself. I quit my PR job in New York and traveled to 13 countries. And it just so happened to be a year of disasters. It was goodness. It was earthquakes. It was tsunamis. It was the Egyptian revolution. It was the Arab Spring.
I don't want to say that disasters have been known to follow you, but the first time I really got to know Angie was sitting for a couple of hours at a dinner with 2 other PR people in Mexico. And there became a contest among the PR people for worst PR stories, bloggers or mostly even travel writers behaving badly. And Angie won hands down.
I think I still win most of the time. Yeah, I think I'm the winner. So that story does come up in the book. It's not totally hashed out. As a matter of fact, I'm working on the next book, and that is all about this incident where someone happened to die on a trip.
On a press trip.
On a press trip that I was leading. So that book will be coming out eventually. But yeah, I remember that. It's quite the story. So yeah. And I don't know if disaster follows me around, but I do have a book called oh my gosh. Yeah. I do have a book called Flirting with Disaster, and all the stories aren't even in that book. That covers 1 year, and there have been many years since. So yeah, I do somehow seem to have a lot of stories to tell, and eventually they become funny. Eventually, like once the crisis wears off. Yeah, but I like to turn those stories into laughter and lessons for people eventually. So that's what the book is about.
And then you and your sister do a podcast, a video podcast, also on YouTube. But Did You Die?
Yes. But Did You Die with the Jet Sisters?
I feel like there's a little of that theme in that podcast title as well.
I didn't start out this way, seeking out disasters and sort of crazy things to happen to me in my life. But if you're that kind of person naturally, and that's just how the chips fall, I might as well lean into it. And so we do. We have the podcast. Every week we talk about a destination and a trip that we went on, and then we talk about whatever was our disaster of the trip. But did you die? No, we're still here. We're still traveling. And so many people have said, I can't believe you're still traveling after all these things. I got drugged in Mexico. The guy died, and I've slept through earthquakes. And there's just been so many things. You've been robbed, etc., etc.
I feel like I have none of these stories, nor do I want them.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that before. Like, how does it all seem to fall in my lap? If that's going to be the cards I'm dealt, then I guess we'll just roll with it. And I still love traveling. And I'm still going to keep doing it. Yeah, might as well tell stories. And in the hopes that the stupid things I've done or the naive things I've done, I can tell those stories now, and other folks maybe won't step into the same hole.
One last question for you. If we go to angieaway.com, your original blog, are we going to find a great post on this region of Florida that we should send people to?
You will probably find an old post on this region that needs updating. But yes, I do have quite a bit of content on Jacksonville. And I have another website that I started a while back, but I haven't maintained enough. But there's quite a bit of content there too. And it's called jacksonvilletraveler.com. So there's some good St. Augustine and Amelia Island and Jacksonville stuff if you're looking for somewhere to start. And there's good suggestions, and a few of the things that we talked about today, some of the hotels, some of the restaurants, they're definitely in there. So you just want like a platform to start planning a trip, because it really is. It's such a big and beautiful and wonderful area. And
excellent. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Angie, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Travel. I think your first time, right?
It is. And isn't that a shame? I have been wanting to come on Amateur Traveler forever. So bucket list achieved. I have known you, Chris, for so long. Definitely.
I think you actually have to pitch to come on the show.
I think so, because I'm just sitting at home like, man, I hope he picks me. I hope he picks me. But you picked me, and I'm so happy that I finally got to come on.
Excellent. Thanks for coming, and thanks for sharing with us your obvious love for Northeastern Florida. Special thanks to both the sponsors and the patrons of the show who both help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my day job now, and I appreciate it. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a sponsor of the show, send me an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. But if you're interested in becoming a patron of the show or learning more what it's about, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I heard from Steve in the episode we did recently on travel to Castile and Leon, Spain. Hi, Chris. Just traveling in Castilla. Went to Burgos, which I love, a great city, and decided to visit Valladolid instead of Leon, as have been before. Valladolid is a lovely city and, as suggested, a good base. The sculpture museum is outstanding. Great cafe, Il Minute. I don't know how to pronounce that because I'm not sure what language I'm in there. The River of Light, beware, I could not find the app, and tourist information could not help other than saying it was from 2015. Also note many things close early August, which is fine for me, but if someone is traveling from USA, it is a long way to discover places closed. Keep up the good work. Thanks so much, Steve. And then new on the Amateur Traveler website since the last episode, we have articles on 22 Budapest travel tips. And then also I just completed an article on Discover St. Augustine's historic sites. So if you want to learn more about the historic sites that we covered in this episode. And then we have top 13 things to do in Bayfield, Wisconsin and Madeline Island. And then also Fog Crest Vineyards and Sonoma County, a review I did of a winery in Sonoma. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.